In a short stretch of time from the mid-90s to the early 2000s, a relatively small group of people started playing around with this thing called the World Wide Web. They had the audacity to think they just might change the world. This project introduces you to the OG players from those hallowed days and lets them tell you what it was like and how you should have been there. Episode 29. Today we're talking to Chris Needham. He was an innovator, creative. He's all around good guy. He's a great guy. He's a fantastic guy.
He's a creative. Hello.
He's a creative. You know, those creatives. They're all the pain in the ass.
Exactly.
And,
I was like, you know what? I think I'll be a minute late because the creatives were never on time. So I thought, I have time.
Exactly.
And there you go. You started already. So you're on time.
Yep,
what changed, Kyle? Is it because you're now running a highly successful multi-million-dollar enterprise that you're now completely on schedule for everything you're doing?
We are nearly multi-million. We are what I would call a micro-global organization.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's fantastic. No, things are good. How about you? Good. I understand some changes afoot. I can't wait to hear about that at some point. But
yeah. Last day at Ogilvy today. So
wow.
That's why I was a little late. I was doing my exit interview.
Very nice. Very nice.
I always wondered what companies do with those exit interviews.
So now you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let's bring on the guest of honor, right?
Let's do it. Fantastic.
Are we doing all the housekeeping? Hey, there he is.
Hey.
Hello. Look at you, looking so well. Look at you.
Thank you so
Kyle and I gained about 20 pounds each over the pandemic, but you haven't changed a bit, mate. Don't you even age? What's going on here?
I have gained a ton of weight, mate. It's just a fabulous camera angle. I don't know.
That's it. Yeah, no, I at my peak, I was hefty. I think I've lost about 25 pounds in the past 3 months because I was like, this is too, like, my doctor said, you got to stop this shit. So, oh, man. So, Chris, how have you been? You're in Boston, right?
Yes, sir. I've been in Boston since 2002, which is 2001. Come up to the Boston office for and spent a year, maybe a little less than a year, in the Boston office.
Oh, and then
I didn't realize it was that long ago. I thought it was later than that for some reason, because I remember Ben Jones moved as well to Boston to go work at Hill Holiday, I think, or somewhere, right? But that was later.
He had a stopover. Ben had a stopover being at a university, like as an admissions officer.
Yes.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he was running admissions or fundraising or something.
Up in Vermont or somewhere, right? Yeah.
I remember leave agency and go live in the country. Yeah, that was the goal.
Yeah. Oh man,
amazing.
Well, it's great to see you. So let's jump in. So where we like to start is at the beginning, and tell us, like, how did you discover the internet? I mean, did you have a big aha moment? How did you end up joining agency.com? Like, what was your origin story for getting involved with
I think, what were you doing before agency, I guess? Because I think you were there when I joined. So what were you doing before?
My origin story is actually that when you're a kid in England growing up, you had access to this thing called interactive TV. That even in the 1970s or early 80s, there was some very simple interactivity with your television. And it was mostly on education programs, so like nature programs, and they would ask you a quiz or something. And it was used by what's called Open University. So in England, anyone could get a degree at a relatively, pretty close to free cost back then. And interactivity through television was a thing back in the 1980s. And I thought, wow, that's kind of cool. And then fast forward, late 80s in college, and you've got email for the first time, and everybody's starting to play locally networked video games. And it just seems so very clear that we all want to communicate with each other in some fundamental way. And I got into the business. It sounds like I got into porn, isn't it? It's like, I got into the porn.
It's the youngest profession.
There you go.
Yeah. I just rewatched Boogie Nights a while back, and God, that's such a great movie. No, I got into, like, I graduated in 91, and I went out to the West Coast, and I was selling textbooks and talking to book publishers and authors, and it was a blast. But I always wanted to live in New York. So I came to New York, and I worked in advertising, still in the book publishing world, which is very sleepy. Advertising in the book publishing world is just like watching grass grow.
Yeah.
And I took a gamble. I took $10,000 out of my 401k, right? Like I had $10,000 saved up in my 401k.
That was big in those days.
Really?
Yeah. I didn't have a fucking visa. I had nothing. I had a girlfriend, and I was staying with her, and I got a job reading scripts for Spike Lee. And it was a great break, because I felt like storytelling is the one thing I've always been good at and decent at in college, and stories my dad to write.
What did you study in school?
African history. King Lobengula in Zimbabwe. Yeah, right in about Africa is where I grew up. 'Cause I'm originally from Africa. And so I read scripts for about a year. And then my really good friend, Julie Hansen, who I went to Yale with, she just started this new group at Penguin Book Publishing, which was digital publishing. And it was putting books out on floppy disks. So I produced Leonard Maltin's movie guide on 5 floppy disks.
Wow.
Working with an agency, working with some local technology groups, and just being a producer, putting it all together, the packaging and everything. And we worked on a Jack Kerouac series that got to CD-ROM, and that was very exciting.
Wow, you moved from floppy disk to CD-ROM. Look at that.
Yeah, 94. It was a big shift. And then I got very lucky. The whole thing is lucky, right? Being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
95, the beginning of 95, when you guys were just getting going, probably, Kyle, and you're starting to talk to Jan, I reached out to this guy called Seth Godin, who was starting a game company called Yoyodyne. And Seth is now a multi-millionaire marketing guru, right? But back then, he was a book packager. He wrote and designed books, and he had gotten really interested in email. He thought email was going to be the really big thing. And so I went to work for him, producing email-based trivia games. And we'd go sell them to companies like Amex. And they would sponsor. We had like audiences of 70,000 people. You know, I wrote this game that was a trivia game where each day there was a little bit of narrative about a young woman who comes to New York and finds her love and finds the best apartment and finds the greatest dog. But you got to vote on what happens next by email. And every you put in by email was an entrance into a sweepstakes giveaway, right? Like a big trip to Barbados or something. And Amex sponsored the whole thing. So I did that for a year, and then went to meet this guy called Aaron Sugarman. And that brings us to Acom.
Yeah, amazing. What was the connection? Who introduced you to Aaron? Do you remember?
I don't know if you remember. Like, here's the thing about everything was networked, right? Like, it was all about friends of friends of friends. So my wife, my girlfriend, who became my wife, Jessie, was working downtown at a small CD-ROM game company. It was something interactive, and they were developing a Chinese tour the Chinese emperor's tombs from the 1300s, and you could walk around it and tour around. And Laurent Stanovich, who we ended up hiring about 4 years later, he I think knew somebody who knew Aaron.
That's cool.
And it was such a small industry at the time. It was just starting to grow. So a lot of people knew each other and, or knew somebody who knew somebody, right? It was always that 1 degree of separation from these guys who were doing some crazy stuff.
The reason I really wanted to go work, I think I also was thinking about Razorfish, but what I really wanted to do was go work on West Broadway downtown. You guys had the coolest offices.
We did.
That was the draw. It was like you just moved into those offices. It was like the beginning of 97. It was January
665 Broadway, yeah.
Yeah, I love that place, man. That place was so awesome.
It was so cool. Yeah, right on the end of Bond Street and Broadway. Yep.
Yeah. And so Yoyodyne was out in Irvington, New York, and so I was commuting every day. It was the worst.
Oh, wow.
And yet, so agency.com, working for Aaron, and I think I was hired as either a copywriter or a co-writer. I can't remember. You guys had the cool spot.
Yeah, that was we did. Those were cool offices. And what was do you remember what you first did or what the initial Aaron were like?
I got put in a very dark room with Jay Zaza. And Jay went on to obviously have a brilliant. Yeah, I mean, he's gone and done wonderful things.
He's done amazing stuff.
Chan's soon-to-be wife was the account director for, I think, British Airways. I think he just won BA. And she asked, the very first day I was to write some banners for BA next to Jay and his wild hair.
His wild hair, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I wrote these things that I thought were really cool. And Ruth took one look at them and was like, you don't have a call to action. It's totally off brand. It's totally off free.
You know what? I can just visualize Ruth having this conversation with you. You know,
I've done nothing in
you were a book guy, exactly. You weren't a marketing guy. You were a storyteller.
No.
You know,
right? And she'd come from a really hardcore agency background, and I just thought she walked on water. I thought she was the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
That was my first day.
Wow, that's cool. That was the BA stuff was like the amount of focus on that. That was such a big deal for us that everyone was laser focused on. You better not fuck it up. And I don't know how had we just won the account when you started, or had we had it for a while?
No, I think it had been in the 3 months. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So the one thing we had when we got first hired by them, they did a quarterly review. And they asked us to self-grade ourselves. And so we gave ourselves a C+ because we didn't want to be too, we knew we were doing great. We knew we were like A - B. So we gave ourselves a C+, and we flew over to England. And then they let us, justify our grade and pitch it to them. And they said, well, you've got a D- and we're about to fire you. So that was our first our first report card from BA was we're about to fire you. So yeah, we were a little hyper focused on that one for years.
It was all your copy, Chris. You didn't have any call to action.
Yeah, exactly. It was all the passive voice in the copy. It was very compelling, but wasn't going to sell tickets.
I remember my first time with Chris when I first joined, and you were talking to me about how you can tell stories on the web, and I'm sitting there going, I never thought of it that way, because I was the tech guy, right? So I'm like, you can do this? Who's doing this stuff? And then we get introduced to a whole bunch of people like, wow, okay, this is pretty cool. I didn't realize you could do all this stuff. And what was that presentation around usability you used to do, or story, how this is usable and this is not, and these graphics work well. And I think, was it you, Kyle, that came up with that whole usability index thing?
The usability, the immersibility index.
Immersibility, that was it.
Exactly.
And I remember sitting through that going, oh, Chris, you were a master of telling the immersibility story.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing I find, we didn't know jack shit back then, obviously, but at the same time, Kyle, you from an intuitive, I don't know where the hell it comes from, man, but you had an intuitive sense of what matters, both in terms of narrative and info design, right? It's amazing to me still how info design matters, but then also just the whole leapfrog forward, that the idea that there has to be value, there has to be utility, and there has to be something that's exciting and sexy. And I think that fundamentally resonates today, right? That's absolutely true. And been true throughout my whole career as the foundation of any sort of digital experience.
Yeah, for me, it's it might come from my acting background. I think it's about empathy. I think it's about putting yourself in the shoes of the person coming there, and what would you want if you were there, or what would someone want if they come, and just kind of lead with that, and then let the technology follow that. So that's where that came from.
So here we are at 665 Broadway. You've joined. You're starting to work on BA. What was sort of? Do you have any of the early things apart from Ruth? Telling you.
What was the vibe? What was it like working there?
Yeah.
That's the thing, and that's the thing I wanted to talk about the most. I've gone on and I've worked for very large companies, and I've worked for smaller companies, and the age-old sort of dictum that culture eats strategy for lunch is so freaking true. It's unbelievable. And that was the thing, right? Like you guys, we created such an enthusiastic culture, and a culture that was about can do. Try anything, not afraid to fail. I mean, way before anybody was talking about that stuff. And a lot of it was sort of run by, frankly, you two and your personalities. I mean, Chan was one gruesome motherfucker sitting in his dark cave.
Smoking cigarettes in the ashtrays.
But no, it's like, and then I think about people coming together. Culture is about people working together and just unbelievable talents. Whether that is Aaron, and I still think about Aaron today and his monkeys on his desk.
Yeah.
Did he ever tell you the monkey story? Like, I'm not in here to. Whenever you came in and you gave him a problem, he'd move a little monkey close to you and say, "That's not my monkey. That's your monkey." Brilliant. I've used that my entire career.
I love it.
And you talk about empathy. I mean, God, no one was more between the two of you and then Aaron. So empathetic. And then just talents, right? Like Uriah, PJ, Folkert, Jason Christopher, Ben Jones,
I know.
Ronnie, Alexis Asiotis.
You can just go through them. Go through every one of those. It's amazing, right? They were just some of the brightest, most passionate. What I loved about it, Chris, the curiosity was always there.
Yeah.
That, even today when I talk to some of the folks, that we hang out and meet or whatever, Sumin Chow I just saw recently, the curiosity is still there.
Sumin's older brother, Luyen, was the guy that was running the digital shop that my girlfriend was working for.
Really?
So that's how it all connects, right? Like Sumin's brother was like, whoa, he was the dope of digital game design in the early 90s.
Yeah, and he's gone on to done amazing things, as has Sumin. I mean, that's the other thing is I think all that curiosity led to just people doing remarkable things in their careers because they left agency and just went and did amazing things.
I think
I mean, agencies at the very heart of everything I've done since, whether it's from very tactically getting my job at Fidelity was because of agency. Somebody said something nice about me who had been a client at agency and now was high up in Fidelity and had known our work. And that meant the door completely opened, all the way to just everyday stuff, right? Like how, at some point at agencies, I was managing over 100 people in the New York office. And the management sort of structure and how do you run a meeting and how do you balance your time between, operational stuff, actual work stuff, and then innovation. How do you balance those three things out? So everything to me, and then just fucking growing up, right? I worked so hard at agency. I remember I was the creative director for MetLife. That was sort of seen as a sort of a sleepy account maybe because it wasn't the sexy British Airways. But I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I look back at that period of time in my life and I just think, what did I do? I built a bunch of really amazing friendships, and I grew up, and I worked my ass off.
Yeah. Talk about the transition. So you got to 665. We had just moved in there. That was kind of this humming. We were still kind of a relatively small family at that point. And then that evolved into, we moved to 20 Exchange and you were managing 100 people. Like, talk about that transition from, starting as a copywriter and then, watching the company grow quickly and you sort of stepping into the roles you did.
Yeah, I mean, what a ride, right? I mean, we got iTraffic came on board, Online Magic came on board, and the growth seemed really intuitive and obvious. Red Sky Interactive, do you remember those guys?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
Red
I
Sky.
always felt like, until, I don't know, it felt like the acquisitions were less acquisitions and more the meeting of talents coming together in different ways. Because I tried doing banner advertising and we weren't. Red Sky did a lot of CD-ROM development and some really conceptual stuff. Online Magic obviously had the amazing London presence, and they were also forward-thinking in terms of like phones and television. So it all made sense. And I think the thing that when we moved to the bigger offices downtown in Wall Street, it felt very like this is just the obvious next thing to do. But at the same time, I think there were sort of tendrils of the thing that I've always carried forward on the sort of negative side, which is like, why did the company eventually sort of collapse in some way, shape, or form? And that is that we grew really too fast. When we stopped integrating and merging really good people from really amazing existing agencies, but instead just sort of threw the doors open to hiring people off the street and hiring interesting people for sure, but not experts in some very needed capability. Do you remember Joel Hassan with his PhD? I was like in awe of that kid. But at the end of the day, his PhD was in physics. What's that got to do with anything?
Right.
Yeah. Mitch Golden has a PhD in physics as well, but at least he was doing something in tech, right? You know.
Yeah.
But
So,
I think you're right. We did grow very fast, but I think we also, the market was changing as well. Remember our first interview with Julia, she used to call us the magicians.
Right.
Like, you didn't understand what we did. It was very magic and it worked. And then all of a sudden, in 3 years, it wasn't magic anymore. There were hundreds of others who are now starting to do it. And the bigger companies like IBM and, those guys started to get into this stuff as well.
Yeah.
And I think, all of a sudden, we had so much work that we just needed to hire the people. And you're right, Chris, sometimes those people didn't fit, but we had to have a body. We got to remember Kyle's hire, what was it, 60 people or 90 people in 30 days or something?
It was 50 and 50.
50 and 50, that was craziness.
Or 30 and 30, I don't know what it was, but yeah.
No, it was 30 and 30, that was it.
That was it.
30 and 30.
Yeah.
And so I think on a personal level, what I did well during that time was sort of take that charge and say, let's do this and let's bring these people in, and also make them still feel like they're a part of a family, and hopefully energize a second layer of culture and sort of excitement and enthusiasm. I felt like that was my one big sort of add to the second office we went in. I was always very, I hope, exciting and excited and curious. But I wasn't actually very good at actually doing the work.
I would beg
to differ there.
Yeah,
But you look at the teams of people. You rattled off a number of names that are highly successful folks today. The work that we were doing, in creative, we had the artists, the writers, but the UX people. I was always mesmerized at how they could think that way, of putting an experience together on a piece of paper. It was like building a house. You're going to go in through the kitchen and then you're going to turn right to go to the hall,
Yeah.
And that team, even today, I'll see things at Ogilvy and I'll go, what? Somebody gets up, we're all really excited. We're doing all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, we were doing that in 1996, right? Yeah. We had a whole department of people who were user experience people in 96, 97, and then how tech came together. Unlike other places, we actually set those teams together. So the creative could sit right next to a front-end developer and say, okay, show it to me on the screen. How does that? Oh, no, move this over here. And the tech guy goes, well, you can't, because here's all the things I need to do to move that icon from there to there. And it was agile. And now they call it agile development. We were doing that. 1996,
All of these sort of things that have now got names and are systematized, I think we were sort of fumbling our way towards it. I mean, Jeff Badner, what a great guy to sit next to. And learn really, I mean, frankly, learn the core underpinnings of what makes graphic design successful or not, and then how that gets applied in a digital space. I was learning as much. That was also the really cool thing. I just felt like I was learning a ton. I was learning a ton
every day.
about obviously digital communications and what makes consumers move. But at the same time, I was also learning about different businesses, different organizational models, HR issues. I mean, it's just everything. Wow,
it was like doing
business
what
school.
Exactly what I equated to in that moment of time is I did my MBA and I got paid to do it.
Yeah.
And I did some amazing stuff along the way, right?
Yep.
Because Jessie, that lady who became my wife, she did go to Columbia and she went to business school from 1990 to 2001. And I know I learned a shit ton more than she did.
Yeah. Exactly.
So talk about what were some projects you worked on, or what were some things that you did where it was either super exciting, or you smacked it into a wall, or you learned a ton? Like, what were some of the highlights of the work, or what was stuff you felt lucky to work on?
I'll give you a positive, and I'll give you a negative. I don't know.
All right,
we went and pitched a bank, and I can't for the life of me remember who it was. Maybe Merrill, maybe B of A. I don't remember. But we're in one of those long, huge boardrooms. And it wasn't for a gargantuan amount of work. It was like 200K. And at the end of the pitch, this really hot sort of marketing manager from the company we were pitching, and she was the boss of it, sort of pulled me aside and said, "That was the best pitch performance I've ever seen. That was brilliant." And I was wearing like pajamas or something. I was like totally and I took that. Actually, I mean, that kind of feedback it doesn't just go to your head, but it also went to my heart. Like I felt like, oh, I'm actually good at this. I can do this.
You were really good. There was something about our creative directors back then that I think one of the biggest skills was being able to talk to the clients at a peer level and just talk to them like human beings and like include them in what we were doing. And you were really good at that.
You know who taught me that is Martin Kneen. Martin, really? The very first.
Martin, there's a name I haven't heard in ages.
Martin's pulled me aside after like Ruth. He pulled me aside, and he'd been a formal agency guy, and he knew what the hell to do. So he pulled me aside after my very first client meeting, and he goes, A, you can't swear. B, you need to actually ask them questions. C, you need to slow down. And he was like, he just gave me a primer, and it was brilliant.
Oh, that's awesome. And I assume, did we end up winning that work?
Yeah, we did. And I worked for that client for like 6 months. And then that project ended. It was a project-based thing. I can't remember. It was like, I think it was Merrill. And we were doing a whole journey.
That rings a bell.
And then obviously the most painful night probably going in my life was the night we all fucked up Nancy Friday. And had to stay in the office until 1, 2, 3 in the morning for like an immediate post-mortem. And before we got on the air, Kyle, you were saying that Norman Pearlstone nearly rang your neck for that one.
No, literally rang my neck.
And I think probably you guys should have fired me for that. Yeah, I would definitely suggest that was the case.
Well, so here's what we learned in it. So basically, what the fuck up was we had a big launch at a building on Canal Street. It was like Canal and Broadway or something like that. It was an old gas station. It was like this hip space. So we booked the space. It was very hip. Norm Pearlstone had sort of all of New York publishing come. It was the launch of one of Nancy Friday's books, and we had built the website for it, or we built the website for all of Nancy Friday's books, right? It was the launch of her website. And 9X promised us we would have internet that day, but they didn't deliver it. And then we showed up with machines without backups of the website on it. So we didn't have internet. So we couldn't see the website, and we didn't have a local copy. But what I learned in that, the reason we stayed till 3 a.m, the Norman wringing my neck and Chan's neck is he was basically pushing us into a corner and goes, I want to know whose head's going to fucking roll. And he basically wanted us to tell him who we were going to fire for the fuck up.
Mm.
And so what we did was we said, well, we've got to get to the bottom of what happened, right? And we did. We got back after the thing happened, and we sort of successfully launched it at some point, but it was already screwed up. And we just started asking what was going on, and the biggest, here's what I learned in that, is that the reason there was a fuck up, I think there were 9 or 10 people that were actively involved in that project, and if a single person had asked a single stupid question, like, hey, do we have a backup of that? Everything would have been fine. That everyone assumed everything was fine. No one was willing to ask the stupid question. So the lesson I learned from that is always ask the stupid question. Always ask the obvious questions. Like just unpack as much as you can, because it's the stupid question that doesn't get asked that is why that evening fucked up. And what I learned is it wasn't just your fault. It wasn't just Chan's. It was like any one of us, had we asked the stupid question out loud, it would have been fine. And we didn't. Like, we just assumed we had it, or we were too busy, or whatever it was. So that was it for me. So I came out of that evening thinking we may have to fire someone. And I came out feeling like, well, then we should fire all of us, because anybody could.
Shut the place down. That's it. We're done.
Yeah. And there was also a thing like Chan didn't like I think there was something about Norman demanding us fire someone, where Chan was like, "Fuck you, buddy."
Exactly. Yeah. I can see Chan going, "No, yeah, this is my shop. You can go away now." Right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think Chan and I had a couple of conversations about that, about like, we're running this thing.
Yeah, exactly. What about innovation, Chris? Were you there when we did some of the early Flash stuff? Because my most vivid memory around it is just one day, just chin drop, when Folkert showed me something using Flash on the web, and I just thought, oh my God, this is absolutely going to change the world.
Yeah. I mean, again, if there's one thing that I take a ton of pride in, is being involved in hiring a ton of really smart people, and being able to take a flyer on people. Folkert was 21 years old when he came up, and he was not going to work for us. We had to really sell him on, and Yuri was a huge part of that. But then getting Yuri was huge. And Yuri wasn't going to work for us. Like, Yuri came to work for us because we're the only people that said to him initially, "Oh, I'm not sure you'll fit." Like, he was like, "Wow, you guys must be that good." But I remember the first time I saw Gucci.com, right? And the remarkable Flash and what was going on, and the very first sense of like how movement can make this that more seductive. And then their work on, do you remember their work on San Antonio?
Oh, I still have that video. That was an incredible piece of work. Just not only the user interface, because if you show that user interface today, people still go, oh my God, right? But the whole connectivity with HT and the Palm Pilot and the voice connectivity, that was amazing. Absolutely amazing. Yeah. I'll have to send you guys the video.
It's brilliant. And that brings us forward to moving from animation into functionality and into cross-platform devices. I mean, Dan Sellers, does that name ring a bell?
Dan Sellers, interactive TV man.
Interactive TV. So I stayed in his apartment in London the summer of 2001, and Dan and I became really good friends. And just like the ability to sort of like put my arm around what I saw as amazing talent, to say, Dan, you need to get your ass to New York, because that's what it's going to be. And pushing him up to meet people like you two. And like, I feel like that's probably like more on the human personal level, is where probably I had a little bit of an impact.
Yeah.
What about because I feel like there was that transition you just talked about. There was also a transition from not only doing interactivity, but in order for us to execute a lot of the digital stuff we wanted to do, it required us doing a fair amount of like change management consulting with our clients. Like, Division A wouldn't talk to Division B. I felt like you were actually particularly good at that piece as well. Like, talk about that transition of, or just that kind of work, but where we almost became, business consultants as much as, site builders.
And I think that became the bridge to my future career, because I then became a client working with agencies, but also then internally understanding how agencies perceive large corporations and how obtuse and opaque it is, but also within large corporations, how to build bridges across divisions that never are incentivized to talk to each other. But back then, I think it's just maybe just some smart people like Ben, and we were beginning to hire some really talented MBAs, folks that actually knew the fuck they were talking about, coming in and giving some rigor to the pitches. I gave up the reins of being the head of creative, and joined your group, Kyle, to basically lead a pitching dynamic, making our pitching a little bit more consistent, and bringing a sort of centralized energy to it. And within that context, pitching wasn't just about what the big idea was, but it was also really building a bridge, back to that word empathy, to the fundamental tensions within the client's organization. And those tensions are rarely just client-centric. I mean, customer-centric. They should be 100% customer-centric, right? But they rarely are. They're nearly always, there's inherent misalignment of strategy within the client's organization.
We used to do a bit of that. I think you're right, Carl. We moved, and as these MBAs came in, I remember Bruce Rebhan and his team in strategy. Really smart.
I love that.
Remember Bruce? He was awesome, absolutely amazing, right? Because before that, our strategy was, well, what are you trying to do? Yeah. Who is the customer? And then we'll figure out the best way to engage with them. But then we started to do to do that, you need to fix this call center over here. You need to connect this thing over here, so Bruce was a strategy.
I also remember when we got it right, like when we would either intuitively or we'd make a couple of phone calls and we'd understand where the tensions were on the client side. One of the things that we did well was, if we understood that dynamic, we would come in with a solution that would sort of answer the problem that we knew they had instinctively. And so we would come in with a solution. And I remember when we got that right, they would be like, how did you know that? How did you know we were facing that? And it was just kind of intuiting, where might these tensions be? And if digital could solve that, then this would be what the solution would look like. I remember winning a fair amount of business just doing that, like intuiting where their challenges were.
And those successes, Kyle, you'd be amazed, or maybe you wouldn't be amazed, at how agencies over the last 20 years still don't do that well. No, right. So when I was at Fidelity, we were working with Arnold. We were working with Arnold in terms of broadcast and some multi-channel advertising, and we were working with Sapiens on Fidelity.com and back-end application design. And those two agencies hated each other, and those two agencies could never transcend their sponsor internally, whether it was the CMO or the CIO, and it was just like getting those, like, guys, one of you two could just simply win the whole lot if you could just play well inside, and they couldn't.
Exactly. Well, so talk about that transition. So because you mentioned some of that more consulting work sort of paved the way. Talk about time, postagency.com. What did you carry forward from those early days? Just talk about your career as it moved forward and sort of what you brought forward, what you left behind, things like that.
I guess the number one thing I brought forward, and it's just a mirror shadow of you, Kyle, and it's probably a faint echo of your energy and exuberance and enthusiasm and inquisitiveness and always wanting to excel and over-deliver. And so it's, again, the cultural traits of what made a work ethic fun, but also successful, hopefully. That's what I brought to every job. So Alexis Hasiotis hired me when I moved to Boston because my wife got an MBA and she went to work for Bain. We moved to Boston, had 2 kids, didn't want to have kids in Manhattan. And Alexis hired me at Smart Bargains, which was a selling high thread count sheets at huge
That's
discounts.
right.
Oh,
I
yeah.
remember when you were there. That's right. I'd forgotten all about Smart Bargains because I skipped that. I only remember popping in to see you when you were at Fidelity. So.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, though, I learned a lot because at the end of the day, if you're an agency, you're still intermediated to the end customer by your
That's right.
client. And
That's
so for me, like, it was so exciting to be selling something directly, and I would change a word and we'd see some impact. I went through 2 Christmas seasons with that, and that business model was fascinating. I learned a lot about business as well. All we were essentially doing was taking cheap eyeballs because of the collapse of online advertising pricing. Post 2001, you could move eyeballs incredibly cheaply and monetizing them through the sale of shit, of stuff. Then as soon as the price of advertising started to creep back up in 2004, 2005, business model collapsed. And that's when they started Rue La La, which was a very good idea. But then with the birth of my second kid, I felt like I needed some more stability. And so the largest sort of big employer I thought, should I go back to agency land and like late night pitches and tremendous excitement and energy? No, I'm 30 years old.
Good decision. Good decision.
Yeah, let's go work for a large company, Fidelity. And I loved it because I ran a creative group focused on digital, mostly middle application design. But things that were like tools to figure out your financial life, but they're pretty lightweight tools. They weren't totally tied into the back end things. And then a lot of advertising. We took advertising at Fidelity, a digital advertising budget in 2004. It was about 5 million. And when I left in 2011, 2012, it was 80 million.
Wow.
So you can see the power of proof of how went, and they spent, so that was a $140 million shop in terms of above the line marketing expense. So more than half was under sort of my creative control by the end. And just again, like the ability to work across very divisive silos. I mean, the CTO and the CIO and the CMO, and then the head of product, they all seem to fucking hate each other. It's just, I don't know if it's the experience of you guys again and again and again, but that's head of product and head of marketing nearly always don't get along because product wants the end detail and marketing just wants one clarifying thing. And then CIO and CTO, they both want the same job. So I don't know what's going on there. And you think this. Go ahead.
Didn't you have the title of chief storytelling officer or something like that, or head of story? Didn't you have some weird title there?
Yeah. Well, so towards my end of time at Fidelity, I sort of moonlighted as somebody that could try to move storytelling devices along. We were stuck in a mode of doing, like interruptive banner advertising. There's got to be a way, right? And so we put together a budget of about, I'm going to say, $1 million, and we went to some pretty interesting agencies at the time to just pitch us wacky ideas. So we did a whole video series of interviewing people in hot tubs about money. We got a wonderful story of a 98-year-old lady jumping out of an airplane because that's what she'd always wanted to do. And she told this wonderful story of saving her pennies, from literally the Depression onward, so that she could always feel confident about her money. And the story was told and reenacted by kids. We got kids to reenact her life story. And then the end of it was her jumping out of the plane. So we did a lot of really fun stuff to try to just move the ball forward around storytelling. But I think at the end of the day, the big thing we missed, and frankly, the big thing that large companies still struggle with, especially financial services, is all the dialogue around social, right? So how do you actually run an effective either consumer engagement approach through social or a customer service approach through social? We just completely missed the boat on that.
Interesting. Interesting.
I think, I remember popping in to see you once, I think 2008 online or something when I was in Boston. I'd seen Ben before that at Hill Holiday and then popped round to see you. And just looking around, the hundreds of people you were surrounded by, you were sitting going, yeah, this is my domain, It must have been an amazing experience to go from, what you started and then where you ended up. But you're right. Even today, at Ogilvy, when I work with clients, it's the same thing. This client doesn't like this client. They don't talk to each other in the company. And I'll tell you, the wisdom that I just picked up from you, and I thought about it, where everybody gets along at the agency level, at the client level, amazing things happen.
Yeah,
that's it. I mean, it's very simple, isn't it? Really, like at the end of the day, being nice to people and having a fun time while you're doing some hard work. It sounds really benign and silly and stupid, but my God, it makes a huge difference.
Makes a huge difference.
I mean, after I left Fidelity, I went to this company, a very similar company to Fidelity, but focused on nonprofits called TIAA. They were TIAA CREF for a while.
Yeah.
The big thing there was that I thought, wow, we could really make a difference. We've got 6.5 million clients who are making, between, the janitor working at a local research hospital is making $25,000 up to maybe somebody who's got tenure at Harvard is making $200,000. So it's not big bucks. Yeah. And how can we really help these people maximize what they're doing? And I couldn't believe it. The amount of internal fighting over what was the path forward from a strategic direction perspective. It really just, I think back to the days of ACOM and what we were doing, and how we were beginning to nibble at core business strategy as a driver of digital success.
Yeah.
And that's still the truth today. If you're not aligned at the top and you don't have a clear singular vision of what it is you want to do, and I got lucky enough at TIA to be sort of influencing the CEO and the board and a lot of that about what digital marketing could do, and what fundamentally I shifted my focus from just digital to branding as a whole, right? Like it became I was doing digital now, I was doing the whole thing. And it was like I was speaking a different language still. I still am amazed that some of the talents that we sort of took for granted at ACOM are still not part of the lexicon of boardrooms today in America.
Yeah, there's a great study. There's a great study with MIT that they do. There's a group there called CISR, CISR, and what they do is they study boards, and then they tie those studies of the board makeup to revenue, growth, all the things that the Wall Street guys have metrics on. And in today's world, if you look at it, it's a direct correlation. The less digitally savvy the board is, the worse their performance is as a company. It's fascinating. Fascinating.
A digital, by definition, isn't an internal practice. It is about engaging with the customer, right? And it's about engaging in a way that is through these very artistic and important levers, like that's now called UX, obviously, but language and information design and interaction design. And so design becomes this hugely important strategic lever, whether you call it digital design or you just call it design. And it just doesn't exist in some of these large companies at the top level.
Yeah. What I always thought about with that is that what digital did was it collapsed the distance between a brand promise and whether or not you deliver it, right? If you say we're about great customer service and you're not with digital, immediately, oh, they suck, right? You know it like that. And so I think that's it, that it feels like corporations feel like they still have time, right? They can still PR spin their way out of a bad situation. But with digital, it's like you have to live the brand all the time, right? And that's right. And that requires a lot of the stuff you're talking about.
That's right. That's exactly
a great example of that was that at TIA, we were supposed to be doing good, right, in the world, supporting nonprofits and helping their employees feel financially secure. But at the same time, unfortunately, the investment side of the house was investing in bullets and was investing in rainforests in Brazil. And that shit got out. And you can't have those two sides of the equation.
Yeah, You've got to manage knowing that those things are going to be found out, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Today's day and age, it can be found out very, very quickly, unfortunately. So yeah.
My experience with ACOM also forged something that has been with me then really for the last 15 years through Fidelity and TIAA. And recently I left TIAA to go work for a startup. And that's working with agencies.
Right.
Yeah, it's working with agencies and how shitty they are. They suck. Agencies basically do the least amount of work for the most amount of money, with very little curiosity about how they can extend their business horizontally within your organization, not just so that they make more money, but the value is accrued to their client's organization, right?
Yeah.
I'm just constantly amazed at the blinkered approach that agencies seem to take. And I'm not going to name names because that's not fair, but I just remember that it was like the antithesis of what we were trying to achieve at ACOM.
Yeah, I totally agree. I say to the youngsters on my team here, you've got to keep curious. You've got to learn the client's business and get to know what drives what they need us to do. The day that the client is just giving us an order and writing a statement of work to deliver something is the day that relationship will change, because we're not adding any more value to the customer now from the agency. We're not doing something that gets them differentiated in the market, but position their brand differently, change the customer experience, whatever it is that we're proposing to do. But as soon as the client, and there's a lot of those clients now who are smarter than some of our account guys, who just say, you're order takers. You're not really adding value to me and my daily life and the business that I hired you to do. So crazy times.
I think models that we've seen work in technology that may be applied by an IBM or an Accenture, whether that's co-working, whether that is agile and agile methodologies between internal teams and external teams coming together and working together. There hasn't been that same level of innovation from workflow perspective when it comes to either, again, sort of marketing can seen as advertising or marketing as seen as an engaging customer experience throughout a flow. I just feel like and then maybe it was the sort of conservative cultures that I worked in financial services, but I don't think so, because it was mission critical to get a fantastic digital experience down, and to a large extent they did in both places. But experimentation is something you've got to be doing all the time, and not just on the product or on your own skills, but also how you work together. So at Fidelity, they were pretty good about this, I have to say, where formerly they sort of had a Google model where 10% to 15% of your day was supposed to be on things that weren't quote unquote billable or quote unquote anything to do with what you're doing that's right in front of you. And I took that and ran with it, and we creating that sort of side storytelling thing. But if I went back into work today, I'm not working anymore, which is great. That's one thing I would like to do, is like help companies think how to do that.
So you left TIAA. You've got last few minutes. What are you doing now? What's going on with Chris Needham?
I'm riding my bike. I'm hanging out in beautiful Newton. I'm hanging time with my kids. I'm being a dad. I'm enjoying the summer. I just got back from Kyle's land of Colorado and was blown away by how beautiful it was. I'm going to Barcelona next month.
Oh, wow.
I'm just hanging out.
That's amazing. Awesome. Amazing. So no sort of startup idea around fixing the world like Kyle is doing?
No. Like, I think all three of us are probably, maybe you two gents are slightly older than me, but not by very much, I don't think. But my ambition, and I feel this very keenly, I had such ambition when I was like starting out in New York, and it was mega fueled by agency.com. And I achieved all my wildest dreams in terms of, professional success in that context, And even then, going on in terms of Fidelity and TIAA and Smart Bargains, I feel like I've had a terrific run at it. But I don't have much left.
I remember one of my most vivid memories, Chris, was you were doing the storytelling thing at Fidelity, and I came to Boston. I wanted to meet with you, and I wanted to pitch you Storyvine, my new thing, and I'm all on fire about it. And we go out to lunch, and because you're at Fidelity, we're at some fancy ass restaurant in Boston. Like I had to temper my how excited I was, but
So you stopped waving your arms like this, and you were doing this.
And so I explained it to him, and he's sort of getting it. And at one point, he just gets really quiet, and he looks across the table from me, and he goes, "Kyle, why do you keep doing this to yourself?" Never forgotten that. And I was like, "Oh, I don't know, because I can't stop." Apparently,
you guys have something in your makeup, right? You both have stuff in your makeup. Ritesh, you are the most remarkable connector of people I know on the planet. Yeah. That's just who you are. And Kyle, you just have this motor bunny inside of you that is like, I've got to keep going. And I think what I'm hoping to find inside of myself is just a sense of real what's the word when you're just very happy with things and you're gratefulness. Yeah.
But you know what, Chris, it's been consistent in these interviews that we're doing, and all this came around when Kyle and I started to think about, we did that, and he'd go, "No, we never did that," and I'd be like, "Yeah, we did," and then I'll do something, and Kyle would go, "Well, that was different." How do we capture these stories? Because it was I tell people this every day, in my entire working career, those 4 or 5 years were probably the most unforgettable, amazing times in my entire life. And we stay in touch, and all of the people have been consistent about it, I think. Kyle, would you say in all the interviews we've done with AECOM people?
Well, it's actually been a problem, Ritesh, for me, because nothing has lived up to that. Right?
Yeah.
Keep expecting to be able to recreate that culture inside other organizations. And actually, I pretty much got fired from Fidelity for doing that, which is that I tried to create the same culture we had which was all about freedom, all about doing things that weren't necessarily dictated to you and by the book and blah, blah. In fact, the fucking book out. Right. And it didn't work. It was like DNA rejection. And so I absolutely agree with you. Like, I look back on those years and the people, just unbelievable sense of I get all choked up thinking about it.
Camaraderie, right? It was the camaraderie that was just incredible.
Anyway, well, this has been great. I wish we had more time.
We always say this every time. We always say we could do another hour of this.
We got to do a big one. Maybe
we do hour and 15 minutes from now or something. I don't know. But
anyway, hang on one second. Let me. Oh no, sorry. Go ahead. Wrap up, Chris.
Well, you're wonderful hosts, and I was dreading this because I'm not very social, and I struggle with looking back. But it's been a delight. Thank you both very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been awesome.
And it's so good to connect again with you. And I look forward to seeing the adventures in Barcelona. Wow, I wish I was you. I want to be you when I grow up.
Exactly. All right, cool. Hang on one sec.